So are we going to do this today out of all the days in the year? Really? How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about George W. Bush and his 9/11 speech out there in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And today is September 11th, 2021, the 20-year anniversary of the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York, the Pentagon in D.C., and also the plane crash in Shanksville. Now, I won't get into some things that, kind of theories, things that were not told to us by the federal government, the 9/11 Commission, and some weird things going on there. So I'll take that and put it over there for now. I want to focus on what George W. Bush said, what he didn't say, what he shouldn't say, and some other reactions to the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. So before I jump straight into it, let's roll the clip. In this clip, you're going to see and hear George W. give his speech. Well, not the entire speech. If I could find the full thing, I'll link to it in the description box. But what I'm going to play right here is a clip so you can hear a very important part of what he said. After we get done watching that, I'll come back. I'll talk about what he said there. Then I'll give you the rest of my 2 cents, my deep, detailed analysis, and then I'll wrap it on up with a nice bow on top. So without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it.
And we have seen growing evidence that the dangers to our country can come not only across borders, but from violence that gathers within. There is little cultural overlap between violent extremists abroad and violent extremists at home. But in their disdain for pluralism, in their disregard for human life, in their determination to defile national symbols, they are children of the same foul spirit, and it is our continuing duty to confront them.
All right, so you saw that, you heard that. Now, that was despicable. George W. I mean, I've not been a fan of his for a very long time, so I can't really say I'm surprised. And, really, beyond George W., I figured somebody would do something like this. Rather than have today be about remembering those that are lost, the 20-year anniversary, reflecting on what we've accomplished in this particular period of time ever since those attacks, rather than it being about that, you want to make it into a political attack. That's what this was. It was political. Talking about, there's some things at home and they're destroying certain monuments. It's like, okay, you're not saying it directly, George W., but I was born at night, not last night. I'm no fool. I know what you were referring to. You're talking about January 6th and people that were involved with that and 9/11. You're not speaking about homegrown Islamic terrorists that may go overseas and then come back and do certain things. You're not talking about that. You're not talking about some of the federales that have done some weird things overseas and domestically, some corrupt people. You're not talking about gangbangers, Bloods, Crips, Lion May, not even the Aryan Brotherhood or anybody like that in the penitentiary. You're not speaking about them. You're speaking about political opponents. You're speaking about the Capitol situation. You ain't speaking about Antifa or Black Lives Matter, who have been rioting for years now. And I think in 2020, they had like 500 riots just in that 1 year. Thousands of demonstrations, like 7,000 demonstrations, but like 500 full-on riots with violence. People got killed and everything else. Comparing that to one January 6th thing with a bunch of unarmed protesters. One person was shot and killed who was a protester. Nobody was shooting any guns from the so-called protester side, but you want to compare that to 9/11? And, the craziest part is that, I'm reading the internets, I'm reading op-eds and things of that nature, and a lot of people feel the exact same way that he does, talking about, I thought that I would never see anything worse than 9/11, and then here comes January 6th. It's like, really? For real? I mean, come on. That's disrespectful to the thousands of people who died that day, who died many years later, because one thing about 9/11, you had all that toxic dust. I'm not sure where it came from, but again, I'll put it over there. All that toxic dust they breathed in, and then they get cancer many years later and die. Remember the picture of the dust lady? It was a black woman covered in dust. I guess she had escaped the tower. She had survived, but there was so much dust on her. A lot of it she breathed in, and she was stricken with cancer later in life. I think she was diagnosed in 2014 and died in 2015 at age 42. A lot of people died that exact same way. A lot of first responders died like that. Many years later, they kind of wasted away, unfortunately, because of what they were exposed to on that day. Not just those that died on the airplanes, plural. Not just those that died in the towers when they got hit and fell. And one tower did not get hit but fell. But anyway, not just those who died from the impact of the planes, but also those who died in the buildings and afterward. So to compare the two is ridiculous. Anybody who does that is not behaving in good faith. They're just, it's a political point. That's all. Just trying to attack the right, because people see the whole January 6th thing as a bunch of Trump supporters trying to attack people, trying to kill people, which is not even really what's going on, right? And to further drive that point home, do you know where you were on January 6th? Do you know what you were doing? Do you know what time of day that you heard the news about the Capitol? I have no idea. I don't know what I was doing that day. And that was this year, 2021. I have no idea what was going on that day. Not at all. But 9/11, that's 20 years ago. It was like yesterday. I was 16 in high school. Hadn't turned 17 yet. I'm a senior. And I was in my first block class. And this was my, I want to say keyboard and some kind of computer class. Because I never forget. I remember the exact location I was and everything. I'm talking about my physical location in the classroom. There was, so you come in the front door. It's kind of hard to show, like, because the camera's flipped. But you have, like, the little squares of a classroom, right? The front door is at the top left of the square. And everybody comes in through the top left and fills out the class. But they fill it out this way. So along the wall, there's a row of computers, and I was on that first row, and my friend, I don't want to say his name because I don't want to put him out there, but my friend was like next to me or a couple seats down. I remember that, and I remember my teacher came in when the planes hit, and he was white as a ghost, like he had seen a ghost. And then he said, "The World Trade Center has been destroyed." I'm like, destroyed? What? What do you mean? Like, did it get demolished? What happened? I had no idea what was going on because he just came in the classroom and told us this. Like, he left the classroom, came back and told us that. So after a while, we just stopped sitting in our seats and doing our work. After a few seconds, really, maybe a minute or two. So everybody gets up to go outside. And you know how those big TVs on the ground? Well, it wasn't big, but it was a big structure. You know, when it's substitute teacher day, and they pull out that TV with the wheels, it's on this high cart. They had a bunch of those in the hallways. Everybody was outside of their class. It was no class going on. Everybody was outside in the hallway looking at the TV and seeing what was going on. And we saw the planes in the building. It was crazy. I'll never forget that. That was 20 years ago. And it's my mind like it was yesterday. Like it just happened. I'll never forget that. And I remember what we went through after that. I remember, TSA came about as a result of that. I remember everybody had flags in their car. I know mom had a flag. She had one of those like wooden handle small flags. She had that. Everybody had the flag sticker on their car. A lot of patriotism came from that. I remember the whole thing about Middle Eastern terrorists, and that was a stereotype, unfortunately, for a while. But it was a complete mess. It was a mess. It was life changing. A lot of patriotism came from that. I'll never forget that day and what happened afterward. Now, as far as January 6th, it's nowhere near the same thing at all. And to compare the two is very insulting. But I don't believe that George W. did that unprompted. I feel like this was something that was done intentionally. These people, these politicians, and sometimes the lines get blurred between left and right. I'm a conservative through and through, regardless of what someone else does, regardless of what they do in Washington, D.C. I'm a conservative, period. But some of these guys out there in Capitol Hill I can't tell what they got going on. I can't tell if they left, right, or whatever. And I think George W. is an example of how the lines get blurred to the point where it's relevant, where you just kind of part of, either you part of the deep state, I guess you would call it that, the old DC state, or you're not. And I think he's most certainly part of that. So it doesn't even really matter who he's going to offend, who he's trying to. It's irrelevant because they got a good old boy network, and they're going to pretty much do what it takes to protect that and not necessarily do anything for the American people. That's what that was, because that was insulting. It was embarrassing. It was totally out of place and unnecessary. All you got to do is go out there, give a speech about the resiliency of America and how we're strong and how we're going to fight and how we're going to protect ourselves and how we're going to support each other. Go out there and preach American patriotism. Don't try to attack people and kind of what the cool kids say, how they say, sneak diss. Don't do that. Just give a good nonpartisan speech. Very simple. But I think I'll leave that right there for now. And what say you? How do you feel about George W. Bush's speech out there in Shanksville? If you saw the full thing or the clip or whatever, was it a good thing that he did, a bad thing? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comments below. And where were you on 9/11? How about January 6th? Do you remember either one? If you remember one of them, I could pretty much guess which one you remember. You know, if you're my age, close to 40 or right around that, I know you know. If you're a young person, you might not have been born 9/11. I understand that too. But for those who can't remember back that far, where were you? And how about this year? Which one is more impactful to you? Because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all these politicians that have an obvious axe to grind are right, and I'm the wrong one. So you guys pretty much know where I'm at. It's disrespectful for anyone to compare the two of those things, to push a political point. But at this particular phase of, I guess you would say, my education and politics, I am not surprised. I am not surprised by anything, nothing at all. Okay, the world could stop spinning right now. I'd be like, okay, cool. What's next? It ain't nothing new. I'm not surprised, unfortunately. But whatever your thoughts are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I gotta say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.